At least 13 protesters were killed during mass protests in Nigeria against the country's economic crisis that turned violent in several states. What fueled the protest? Hunger. That too in a nation that has long been a top African oil producer, but whose citizens are among the world's poorest. Frustrated with the growing economic hardships, Nigerians had been planning nationwide protests all week against the country's worst cost of living crisis in a generation. Authorities confirmed 4 people were killed by a bomb and the arrests of hundreds in the protests that triggered curfews in several states. More than 300 protesters were arrested and curfews imposed in the northern states of Kano and Katsina after the looting of government and public properties. This is according to the Nigerian police. 1 police officer was also killed and several others injured. The protests were mainly over food shortages and alleged bad governance in the country. Nigeria's public officials, frequently accused of corruption, are among the best paid in Africa, a stark contrast in a country that has some of the world's poorest and hungriest people, despite being one of the continent's top oil producers. Carrying placards, bells, and Nigeria's green and white flag, protesters chanted songs as they listed their demands, including the reinstatement of gas and electricity subsidies, whose removal as part of the government's audacious reforms to grow the economy has had a knock-on effect on the price of just about everything else. What makes all this worse is the stark gap between the haves and the have-nots. Nigerian politicians and lawmakers, often accused of corruption, are some of the best paid in Africa. Even the president's wife, her office nowhere in the constitution, is entitled to SUVs and other luxuries funded by taxpayers. With momentum soaring on the social media for the protests, authorities feared a replay of the deadly 2020 demonstrations against police brutality or a wave of violence similar to the last month's protests in Kenya, where a tax hike led to chaos in the capital. The government of Nigerian President Bola Tinubu says it is determined to prevent such a scenario in their country. Nigeria's population of over 210 million people, the continent's largest, is also among the hungriest in the world, and its government has struggled to create jobs. The current economic hardship under Tinubu, who promised renewed hope when he was sworn into the office in May 2023, is blamed on surging inflation that is at a 28-year high, and the government's economic policies that have pushed the local currency to record low against the dollar. The frustration is widespread, though it is worse in northeastern Nigeria, where the world's longest war on militancy has left 4.8 million people in dire need of food, according to the United Nations Food Agency. The World Food Programme says nationwide at least 32 million Nigerians face acute hunger, which is 10% of the global burden. Tinubu's aides have sought to defend his achievements and efforts to ease the hardship, citing convoys of food trucks dispatched to the worst-hit states, cash support to families and businesses, and a new law that more than doubled the minimum pay of government workers. But the new minimum monthly wage of $43 is 6 times lower than what labor unions said they needed to cover for the loss in the value of the Nigerian currency. The president's critics also say he has performed below the expectations that catapulted him to power 14 years ago. They point to Nigeria's deadly security crisis in the conflict-battered north and an ailing economy which was once ranked Africa's largest but is set to slip to 4th place this year. Tinubu's economic reforms, including the suspension of decades-long and costly gas subsidies and measures by the country's central bank such as currency devaluations to halt the distorted foreign exchange rate, was supposed to save the government money and also shore up dwindling foreign investments. However, their poor implementation has had a knock-on effect on the price of just about everything else. The suspension of gas subsidies more than doubled the price of petrol. In a country where millions have little or no electricity, that meant more money spent on fuel for generators and a growing number of people trekking to work because of rising transport costs. More people are also having to work multiple jobs. Frustrated with all this, thousands of mostly young people poured onto the streets across Nigeria on Thursday. Do tell us what you think about this video in the comment section, and for more news updates, subscribe to India Today.